What's up, guys? We got another game with the white pieces against Matthew Kyer, 935. We open with c4 on move 1. He responds like we've been seeing recently with e5, the reversed Sicilian. I go g3 so I can fianchetto my long bishop. We know this. He develops his dark squared bishop to a very active square, eyeing my king, preparing castling. It's the first time we've run into this. We're just going to continue developing our bishop, covering the light squares. Okay, now black develops their queen. We know how I feel about these early queen moves. They're not so good generally. The threat is he's threatening checkmate in 1. Awesome. The drawback, it takes away this wonderful square from his knight, which is its rightful owner. And I'm obviously not going to fall into checkmate. So once I defend checkmate, his queen is going to be misplaced and easy to target in the future with, let's say, knight jumps or knight and bishop coordination, etc. So anyway, I have to immediately defend this threat. I can do it like this. I can do it like this. What do I want to do? If I develop my knight, he's likely to push. So let's go e3, just shutting the bishop out completely. You know, like the knight development, yes, it defends against checkmate, but the bishop is still strong on the diagonal. But by going e3, the bishop is less strong. Okay, so now he goes d6, solidifying the center, opening up the light squared bishop's diagonal. Fine. I'm going to develop my queen's knight behind the c-pawn, so it's harmonious, eyeing and coordinating with the d5 square, as well as the e4 square. Both of these squares come with the tempo on the queen, right? Which we said was out of position. So he develops his knight. This looks towards the center. His developing move. Good stuff. Doesn't threaten anything. Doesn't have any real drawbacks. Okay. So now it's our move, and we have this beautiful d5 square for our pieces to organize attacks. Because he put his queen here, we can immediately throw a knight here because it comes with tempo, as well as this threat. So he has to address this, and then we can continue our development further. We don't have to do that immediately either, though. It's not like forced. However, we are going to include it. We're going to improve a piece for free. Normally improving a piece takes time, but now we get to do it for free. So I'm going to throw it in and then continue my development. Hopefully that makes sense. So he moves his queen to f5. What does this threaten? Well, it doesn't threaten anything. It eyes the light diagonal, but there's no threats or coordination with other pieces. What's the drawback? The drawback is he addressed one threat, but this was a dual threat. And now I have this fork, which wins material, and that's the game. For me, I don't see a reason why we shouldn't go for that. It also comes with check. So he moves his king. It makes the most sense now to just take the rook. And now that he's in a desperate situation, hanging a rook, he could have gotten out of it by eventually taking the knight and only being down in exchange. But instead, he puts his knight in the center, where he hangs it, hoping that he'll take with his bishop, renewing this checkmate in one threat, which I can still defend in a number of ways. So there is no reason not to take this knight. So I'm going to take the knight. And okay, my mind's blown. I thought he was going to take with the bishop so he could try to checkmate me. Unrealistic, right? I could put a knight or queen on f3. But instead he takes with the pawn. What does this threaten? Well, it threatens nothing. He can't even bring a rook here to give me a check because his knight's in the way. What is the drawback? The drawback is it's a pawn move. He's not moving his pieces. He's not getting closer to castling. He didn't take with the bishop, which means it doesn't come with a threat. and he blocked his own bishop. Now my king is safer because his pawn blocks his bishop, right? My king is safer because of his move. So now it's my move, and I'm up 8 points of material, which is completely overwhelming. So now I think it's time to bring out our most powerful piece and make sure we're not blundering any checks that hurt us. So we notice that he does have 2 checks, but we could just sidestep with our king. Instead, he takes the queen, which is very bad for him because we're up so much material that once he gives us the queen, he'll absolutely have no counterplay possible. And so we take the queen, develop our knight to its natural square, and prepare castling all at the same time. He develops his king's knight to f6, its natural square, and prepares not castling because his king moved, but prepares to bring his rook over with a check. However, we are in time. Look at this perfect formation, extremely solid, extremely compact, unhurt. You know, we're invulnerable here, and now we have complete safety. Instead of moving his rook over or going for my knight, he jumps his knight into the center. He moves it a second time, but what does it threaten? The thing is, it doesn't threaten anything. It doesn't coordinate. And what's the drawback? Well, it's undefended. It's in my territory, and he's not increasing the power of his position by moving other units. You know, mathematically, he's not controlling the most number of squares possible. So if you move a piece that's already controlling a certain number of squares, right, instead of introducing a new piece, it's obviously your position is generally less powerful unless you're targeting a specific square for a, pinpoint strike. Anyway, he moves his knight into the center. I'm just going to naturally develop, blockading his pawn so he can never open up his bishop. Also, it protects my pawn. Also, it hits his knight. Multi-purpose move. So he just has to go back with his knight. I'm just going to immediately develop my last minor piece, connect both of my rooks, and pin the knight. So we got to do this all for free because he moved his knight back and forth, right? So we got to make the solidifying move here and a developing move here for free. He now develops a minor piece, his last one, targeting the knight, which is defended. I'm just going to take the knight because I'm up so much material. Comes with check and everyone is pawn structure. Now you could bring a rook and increase the power of our position, or because we're up so much, we can just provoke the trade. And if black has no pieces, he auto loses. So because we will have pieces. So he moves his king over. I guess now it's time for him to collect the knight, right? So we're just going to develop. We're going to bring our rook and now control a great number of squares. Oh man, this guy's just baiting me. Now he goes this way, sidestep, and now he's going to take with the rook. He had to change a heart. The drawback of this move is that it undefends this square. So now I could take, and he doesn't even get the knight. So now he's just moving his bishop, creating one move threats that don't actually do anything. I'm going to move my rook, of course, to a defended square, and it comes with a threat. He might even move his bishop back to protect it. But no, instead he attacks the construction I have here with his rook. At least he's developing his rook, right? He's making it active. That's good. He's hitting my bishop. I'm going to bring my bishop back to this wonderful outpost, defended square, with a different threat. So he attacks my rook with this pawn, but I'm going to scoop up this pawn. Generally, you don't want to do this because it activates his bishop, but I don't really care because I'm going to move my rook away with threats, and I'll be able to play d4, shutting it if I want. And I'm up 10 points of material, but if this was even material, you definitely probably want to leave his pawn here so he blocks himself. But now he lets us bring in another piece with tempo, and then he lets us take this piece, and I'm not really commenting much because you see all the free stuff. So you kind of see what I'm doing. He doesn't have any moves, right? His bishop's not actually going to do anything by itself. He moves it back, but my knight now has a free escape. He just gets a free trade. So he takes with the rook. The rook's his only piece left. I take with check. His whole army is gone. He's still playing. And what's white's best move? If you get it wrong, go play checkers. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Boom. Checkmate. And we knock him out of the park. Get him out of here. Matthew's gone. But we have some boba tea left, so. Guys, we got somebody over 1,000. He plays c6, which is different from everything else we've seen recently. Now he tries to fight on the light squares, so that's different. He opens up with like the caro-kann formation and challenges our center. But I take, and now the game is even. I'm just going to develop my bishop, put a little pressure on his central pawn. He develops his bishop before his knights. This it doesn't threaten anything, it just looks at the diagonal. The downside is that it undefends the queen side light squares very early in the game. So at some point I should be able to play queen b3, and by some point I mean right now, because that comes with a double threat. And so you usually want to develop your knights before your bishop, because removing your bishop immediately creates obvious weaknesses, whereas when you move the knight it's not the same. He goes e6, solidifying move, protecting the central pawn and opening up the bishop. The downside is maybe I can take this, maybe you're not supposed to, I have no idea. I take this, he develops a knight, and what is my move? That's the thing. What do I want to do there? I suppose d3 is good enough. Just shutting down his bishop. I can go e4 whenever I feel like it. So he does move his knight here. Now I have to be careful that my queen's not getting in trouble. I also don't feel like calculating, so I'll probably get in trouble, but whatever. I think I should just block with my knight. Block the c file so there's no coordination on this square with the rook, let's say. If he attacks me, I'll just take his pawn. And then I have this escape diagonal. Unless he goes bishop here, then maybe I'll pin the knight and have this escape. Houdini. The great Houdini on b7. Okay, so instead of hitting my queen, he's very mature and just develops a piece. Pressures f2 a little bit, develops a piece. Maybe he's creating some type of net, this sneaky foe. Although I'm not quite sure he's got me, but maybe, hopefully, I don't want to run into it. I can kind of hit this, but then he goes here, and that's not good. I could develop this knight. That's reasonable. I could go d3. I'm going to go d3 and just blunt this bishop while developing. Simultaneous, multi-purpose move. That walks into this, maybe. I still have to develop this knight, and we know where we want to put it, so he develops his knight towards the center. We should probably just develop our knight towards the center. He just castles, which makes perfect sense. I mean, we're just gonna castle, and now we're solid. We're up a pawn, so if we just consolidate our queen, we have a clear advantage. He can't push in the center with e5 and create a pawn duo because d5 would hang. It's hit twice, defended once, x-rayed by the bishop. As I say, he can't play it, he plays it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's right. I don't know. But I'm gonna take it. And he can try to prove me wrong. Maybe he should have kicked my queen and then kicked my queen. Now I have intermezzo checks. That doesn't make sense. Yeah. So now I take it. And I don't see his idea. Now I'm up 2 pawns, right? And my queen's out of danger. And he can't move the knight because then I get a queen trade. And his bishop would hang. And his e5 pawn would hang. And right now his e5 pawn's hanging. A lot of stuff's hanging for him. And the bishop's x-raying the rook. So my bishop is clearly better than his light square bishop, right? And even though I didn't move my dark square bishop, it still hits a lot of squares. So he moves his dark square bishop, maybe so he can move his knight. This doesn't threaten anything. Downside is I'm not really sure why he's moving the same piece twice. It's a little weird. So as it confuses me, I'm going to hit it and see what he does. Maybe just to get it off this diagonal, I can develop or put a rook without worrying about it. He goes back to where he came from. I could actually continue expanding. That's interesting, but I might as well take this pawn. I don't see a reason not to. So I'm just going to take this pawn because everything of his is connected. So as soon as he moves this knight, stuff falls or trades happen. And I'm up 3 pawns. My bishop's really nice. He moves his bishop back and hits my queen. This is a threat, a bigger threat than what I'm posing. So I can't just take his knight because he'll take my queen. I can't, do anything. So I have to move my queen. This is fine. I just have to make sure. Ideally, I'm defending my knight. So maybe the e4 square. Although e4 and knight here, then I have to move my queen again. It's not a big deal. I was just hoping I had something better. If I take his rook, I get a rook, he gets a queen, right? Then I get a queen. So I get a rook, he gets a queen, I get a queen. So right now I'm up a rook. Then he takes my bishop. So I'm up an exchange. And then I could trade pieces the knight. Right? Am I not calculating something? Maybe this works. I was hoping I had something better than just going queen e4. I mean, I was just looking for a queen trade. I wasn't trying to win material because I'm up 3 pawns. I just wanted to get the queens off and I have a nice position, a winning position. And I really didn't want to go for queen e4, so by process of elimination, although you're supposed to start with the forced move, so there's that. So he does take. I have to take his queen, or what's the point of all this? He could take my knight, but then I could retreat my bishop, and I feel like my bishop is the better piece. So you probably would have wanted to take that. And now I'm up 3 pawns and the exchange. I have a perfectly placed bishop. I can bring out my other bishop with tempo, as well as a rook with tempo. So everything is in my favor. He makes a random pawn move. We know that that's not going to work when you have undeveloped pieces. Whatever this rook is worth here, it's worth 4 times as much on one of these files, right? So to increase the power of your position, to get it above 9,000, you bring more guys into the game, you hit more squares. So anyway, he defends the knight. But I would rather have his bishop than his knight, because the bishops are very strong on this open board because they control so many squares. So I'm going to hit the knight, forcing it to move, and then I'm going to take the bishop. Now it's not a free bishop. He could go knight c4 defending the bishop, but I still just want to take the bishop instead of the knight. If I'm going to give up, okay. So he does not defend his bishop. Maybe he didn't see it. So he moves closer to my king. What does this threaten? Nothing. What's the drawback? Free bishop. And free threat. And resignation. Very nice. We're just going to do one more. I want to say quick one, but that's not really in my control. We have Zvezda 998, who opens with knight f3. Look at this, very advanced, very mature. So I'm going to copy him so I could feel sophisticated too and go knight f6. Okay, now he transposes to a d4 opening. I'm going to go c5. This asymmetric position offering up a free pawn. Now, why would I offer up a free pawn? What is wrong with me? Well, I'm going to go e6. This controls a little bit of the center, and it opens up and develops my bishop, which threatens to win my pawn back with a development move. He says, you're not going to get your pawn back, okay, buddy, because I'm defending it with my pawn, so good luck. Downside of his move, he's not moving pieces, he's moving pawns. He's also created weakness on this diagonal and some weak dark squares, but I can't win my pawn back, so he's up a pawn. Good for him. What am I gonna do? Well, I kind of want to undermine this structure. I'm gonna play this move a5, and although it is a pawn move, it actually increases or improves my piece. So even without moving the piece is improved. And should I take, my piece is greatly improved without ever having touched the piece. So he moves his queen. I'm not sure why. I can't even come up with his idea other than this is the weirdest way to defend the b4 pawn ever. So it doesn't threaten anything. The drawback is it's a terrible move. It doesn't develop a minor piece. It doesn't get closer to castling. I would even go as far to say it doesn't address this threat because taking with your queen is crazy. And it also walks into an obvious developing move. Like obviously black is going to put his knight there. So I'm going to put my knight there. It comes with a tempo. He has no checks, right? Because my king is protected by these pawns. It also comes with a threat on this pawn as well. So white moves his queen again, second time in 6 moves. What does this threaten? Well, it threatens nothing. The drawback is he's moving his queen, not a minor piece, not castling, and hanging stuff. I could continue harassing the queen if I want, but I'm just going to settle for this pawn, which blunts this knight's development as well as severely increases the power of my rook. And now my rook has access to all these wonderful squares. I don't need to move it, and it's very strong. I'm also threatening to win my pawn back with a bishop developing move, and my position would be amazing. And you might say, well, what about your light square bishop? Well, what about his entire army? Would be my retort. So he moves his knight to the center, making contact with my knight, as well as the e6 pawn, but there's never a sack there, it's too solid. So the threat, no threat, it's just a piece trade. The downside, he's moving the same piece again. He's not developing a new minor piece, he's not getting closer to castling. He's wasting time, and piece trades are not going to be good for him. Because I have a lead in development, and I'm going to have a lead in material. I'm going to take this pawn, so now I get my pawn back, but I also won a pawn earlier, so now I'm up a pawn. I develop my bishop to its most aggressive square while preparing castling. So he takes my knight with his knight. That's just a piece trade. Now you could take with the b pawn towards the center. You could also take with the d pawn, but that doesn't, like, the argument for that would be to open up your bishop's diagonal, but since your e6 pawn is here in the way, it's a weird argument. So I'm going to take with the b pawn towards the center, with the knowledge that I'm going to be playing d5 in the future and creating this little pyramid. So white goes queen g3. What's the threat? Well, he's threatening to win a pawn. What's the downside? Well, I'm obviously going to castle next, right? Which protects the pawn, gets my king safe, and removes his threat. He's not moving a piece. He's no closer to castling, right? This bishop can't get out, which means his king can't castle. Moves the same piece again, loses time. So it's just absolutely terrible. So we're just going to castle. And we have a completely winning position by move 9 because they move their queen all around the board. And it doesn't do anything. A queen alone cannot do anything. It needs to coordinate with other pieces. So now he goes e3. This blocks his bishop's diagonal this way, but opens up his light square bishop's diagonal. I mean, he doesn't really have any moves at this point. Like I said, we're completely winning. We now have just overwhelming position. We have options. We can go d5, but I'm going to go a little more spicy and go knight e4. This hits the queen. It puts a knight in the center, gets a little closer to his camp, and we can easily support it with d5 pawn, and it vacates the f6 square, potentially for our queen, now that this dark square diagonal is open because there's no b pawn. So the observation earlier of the when he moved the b pawn, I said it weakens this diagonal. So now I'm thinking about how I can use it. So he moves his queen away from the attack. What does this threaten? Well, it threatens the knight and the bishop. What do I do? That's the question. The knight defends the bishop. How do we defend them? How does this work? If we defend the knight and he kicks the knight, we're going to lose the bishop. That doesn't make sense. Something's fishy here. I know. Let's go queen f6. And if he takes the knight, we'll just take the rook. Ha ha ha. Got you. So I walked into a double attack. Although technically, because one's defended, it's not really a double attack. He does take the knight, which gives me the rook. And if my queen is not trapped, I should be good. And I don't see a way for him to trap it in this position. His knight's also hanging. He develops a bishop and prepares castling. Like I said, his knight's hanging, but if you take it and he castles, well, you could still remove your queen by taking this. I am up 3 points of material. However, there's 2 questions on the screen, right? And the reason you ask them is because let's say you're looking at this, you're like free knight, blah, 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 and you don't ask yourself the question on the screen. Your opponent makes a move, bishop d3, and you have to say, what is the threat? If you just dismiss it as a developing move and look for the knight, and you don't ask the question, you're going to lose the game. So what is the threat? Checkmate in 1, so you don't have time to take the knight. So if you go d5 hitting the queen because it looks like a good move, but you didn't ask the question, you get checkmated. So I don't want to get checkmated. So I'm going to play f5, blocking the diagonal with a tempo, because I do want the turn again, so I can do something with my queen, consolidate a little bit. Now I'm stopping his idea. He might go here, although it no longer coordinates with the bishop, which is nice. Also, I have the option of developing my last minor piece to its only active diagonal currently. So bishop a6, kind of a Benko idea, Benko gambit. I could trade these bishops, whether he castles or not, and get rid of his only piece that's developed for my piece that isn't developed. And also I could bring the rook in at some point, but I would like to get rid of this bishop first, connect my rooks, and get rid of this piece because all of my pawns here are on light. So they already control the light. My bishop and them are kind of overlapping, so let's get rid of one or the other. I'm obviously not going to get rid of my 4 pawns. So he moves his queen, which was under attack. What does this threaten? It threatens to take the bishop, so that's something. It does walk into this, but if he takes the bishop and you take the bishop, it's defended, so it's not really a tactic. We can just remove our bishop to a safe square if we like. That's fair. Let's just do that. It seems reasonable. I'm running low on time because I'm talking a lot and I'm not thinking a lot, so I should probably reverse that equation. Reverse that formula. I need some boba brain energy. Sorry. So he retreats his queen to b3. What does this threaten? Um, to trap my queen, actually. This guy, unbelievable. I can't believe this guy. And it almost works. This mother. But luckily, because I'm not even paying attention, I have the a2 squares still under my control. So the drawback of his move, he's still moving his queen around, wasting time. It would be awesome if he trapped my queen, but like I said, I have this move. I don't want to bring the rook in, right? Because then my queen is kind of stuck in the corner. I don't know. I want to take the queen, get it out immediately, and just offer this trade. He can't go anywhere. He can't avoid it. This is protected, which means I get the trade, which means my rook comes in, and with no queens, no counterplay. Okay? Say it with me. When you're up a rook, or an exchange, or a piece, no queens, no counterplay. You see? Now that the queens are gone, what can white do to me? Look, there's nothing. He can't do anything. These pieces don't do anything. He could sack every one of them, and he wouldn't be any closer to my king. So he moves the same piece twice. It does come with a threat, but if I can move my piece with a really strong counter threat, then it is a waste of time, not a tempo move, because I have a counter tempo, and it's a waste of time. He should have castled, he should have developed, he should have not moved the same piece twice. And now my rook comes with this threat. You can't actually defend the knight except by hanging your light square bishop. You move the knight, you hang even more stuff, so castling might be his best move. Yeah, you lose the knight, but at least now your rook defends the bishop. You can develop the bishop if you want. But the game is over because I'm up 4 points of material, 2 pawns, and an exchange. So he finds probably the best move in castles. I'm going to throw in d5 just as a troll move because it comes with tempo and improves my center and makes the bishop worse. But maybe that gives him some type of resource like, I don't know, knight c3, right? In which case I take the bishop and now my pawn structure is worse or something. So it may allow for some other variation that's less favorable, like this. Like I missed this move completely. He moves his bishop, attacks my rook, so I protects the knight with the rook. So now the knight's not hanging. And if I move my rook, he can move his bishop, and I don't actually win the piece that I could have just taken last move. But to make the game more interesting, I'm going to let him take my rook, and I'm just going to take his bishop because it's funny. And so now the material is much more even. I'm only up 2 pawns, so this gives him a chance to get back in the game. I could go, let's say, bishop f6 and contest the diagonal, but I just think that c3 is a nasty move. And now he can't get out with his pieces. Yes, this is it. This is what I live for. c3. Yes. And even though I gave up an exchange, I literally just took 6 points of material, both these pieces, out of the game. So now he brings his rook over to the open file. I immediately want to contest that because I'm no longer, up a ton of material. So he takes, I take, and he can't bring his pieces in. And that's the power of pawns and positioning and making sure pawns and pieces are working in harmony. For example, this bishop and these pawns are not harmonious at all. But by putting this here and having this around it, they control the light, the bishop controls the dark, even this protects the bishop, so it's very harmonious. So in order to break out from his cage, he does the only thing he can, which he has to, and he has to sack a piece. Maybe sacking the knight was better, but it's kind of irrelevant. Okay, now we have 2 bishops. We're up a bishop or a piece. We're just going to improve, with the defended on a defended square with a threat. He has no forward jumps other than a4, so the bishops are going to far outclass the knight. And I'm just going to, because I have a minute, I'm just going to quickly move. I'm just bringing my king in because the king is a piece, and it's actually an extremely strong piece because it controls so many squares. That's quite a lot of squares. And I'm basically just opening up the center for my bishops. I'm up a piece. I'm willing to trade. I'm going to push just because it's just a very annoying pawn. It creates targets. I'm going to develop my bishop finally on move 28. I'm going to move it for the first time with a nice threat. I'm going to just take his last piece because I really want to simplify my life. And I don't want to have to calculate knight jumps or anything like that. When I'm the only one with a piece, all I have to do is solidify my position with my king and then move my bishop around the board kind of. So I'm just going to get a little bit in his camp and try to win some, like a pawn. Obviously, I can't trade all the pawns and just have king and bishop because king and bishop versus king is a draw. I need at least one pawn, and it can't be the a pawn. Luckily, there is no a pawn. Okay, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to get my king in and attack this pawn, which can't be defended. And because I have the c pawn here, there are no, running up the board tricks with the d pawn because I just take it. He can't push this because I ignore him. And if he takes, I just take back and he makes no progress. So he has no way to make progress on this side of the board. And if that's the case, well, I can basically do what I want and he's going to be in Zugzwang. Does that show up on camera? I don't know if it's backwards or not, but it says Zugzwang. Anyway, I have 30 seconds, but now he only has a king move or a pawn move. If he moves the king, I get to inch my king closer. So he's in Zugzwang. So any move he makes his position worse. And now he jettisons the pawn, but I didn't pre-move, right? And he can't get in, so his king's not going anywhere. And now I'm just going to make way for Prince Ali. Little pre-move, because I'm sophisticated. We'll get a queen. I know it's no stalemate. You need to check for stalemates before, if there's time on the clock. Like there's plenty of time now. In the other situation, I had 1 second left, so that's different. So anyway, I'm checking. There's no stalemates. But there are checkmates, and that's what we're looking for. And that's checkmate. We gained some points. We're 991. We're so close to 1,000. We're getting good, guys. We're getting good. Hopefully that helps. Submit your games. Goodbye.